Welcome back, and I'm always honored to have this gentleman with us, and I regard his work to be top-notch, and I'm delighted to have back with us today Dr. DrAlex McFarland. He's a director of Christian Worldview and Apologetics at the Christian Worldview Center of North Greenville University. He's a talk show host, he writes, he does all kinds of things, and I got him for a couple of segments today to talk about something that I actually witnessed. I was watching the O'Reilly Factor, the Bill O'Reilly, the day that he tried to explain away Phil Robertson's statements concerning homosexuality. And I'm watching this show and I'm saying to myself, Bill, you got it totally wrong. And yet his arrogance, he seemed to push through as if he was the final arbiter on the topic and let it hang out there. And I, quite frankly, was fairly disgusted. I got as far as sitting down to the computer to write Bill O'Reilly an email, but I didn't, Alex. Maybe I should have. But I was, quite frankly, I was very disgusted. Did you see it?
Yeah, I was. And yeah, it makes me squirm in my chair as well when any and all disagreement with homosexuality is dismissed as mere simple homophobia. Yeah. And so I wrote an article, and I've spoken on this in a number of places, but I really appreciate you taking some time to kind of unpack this and address this with me.
Well, I do want to get into it because the other part of what Bill O'Reilly has done here is really the problem that a lot of people do. They cut and paste the Bible to say what they want it to say, and then they have the audacity to interpret it as the truth. And he's clearly used the power of his show to convey that, and I was, quite frankly, disgusted.
Well, let me say this. There is such a thing in the world of broadcasting as media training. And if you go through media training by professional publicists and people that work with politicians and corporate leaders, and let me say I've over the last 20 years had my share of media training as well. You need to understand this, folks, that talking heads on television and pundits and commentators and certainly politicians and often CEOs of businesses, they are trained to answer whatever question they want to answer. Let me say this. If you're in a hostile media situation or a hostile interview situation, the publicist will tell you, regardless of the question, you answer the question you want to answer. Now, let me say this. For those, when Christians come along and we say that abortion is wrong, or homosexuality is wrong, or Jesus is the one savior and Islam is a false religion, and then we are told that we're, anti-freedom, or we're heterosexist, or we're Islamophobic. Sometimes people dismiss our content out of ignorance, but oftentimes, like a Bill O'Reilly, or one of the other talking heads on television that dismiss a Phil Robertson as being homophobic, and they never address their arguments or their content. Let me say, they know exactly what they're doing. They're completely dodging the content, and they're just painting with a broad brush and falsely accusing any voices of dissent as being fear. And it's not that way at all. In the case of Phil Robertson in Duck Dynasty, there was no indication whatsoever that his remarks were made out of fear or phobia. And I wrote an article that's floating around the internet now on 5 what I call extra biblical reasons that homosexuality is wrong. But we've got to address this pervasive accusation that any and all voices of dissent against the homosexual juggernaut and the well-funded, well-organized homosexual publicity machine, that it's homophobia. It's in some people's lives it might be, but certainly in the case of the great Christian thinkers of the world, it is not.
Well, Alex, the response in support of Phil Robertson was historic, and if not, and I think we missed a point as Christians to celebrate the fact that he basically won this thing, and it got pushed to the side. But the only thing he did was say what the Bible says, and he got criticized for it. And when I watched Bill O'Reilly pull out other scriptures about don't judge unless you want to be judged, to slam him down, I thought, boy, this guy really missed a point. But at the end of the day, Phil Robertson won the argument.
He really did. He really did. And, you know, for once, and maybe this will be the trend of many other victories, the gay, lesbian, transgender publicity machine got their hat handed to them, right, because there was a groundswell of support. As you may well remember, the Cracker Barrel people, right, Cracker Barrel restaurants, right, that were going to take all the Duck Dynasty merchandise off their shelves in about 24 hours, issued a public apology. And let me just say to everyone listening, what this illustrates is there is still a remnant of people, in fact, I would say more than a remnant, the majority, that believe in moral absolutes. Mm-hmm. And let me say, we believe in heterosexual monogamy and morality, not because we were force-fed it, but because it's written on the human heart. It's written on the human heart, and that's why the Bible calls it self-evident, undeniable truth, because we know right from wrong. We just don't always act on it or defend it. But yeah, Phil Robertson won this, and there was a groundswell because there is still human beings know right from wrong, and all the conditioning in the world, all the enforced pluralism of the public schools and a left-wing media, and all of the government pandering to the homosexual lobby because of elected officials that really don't have the moral backbone to stand for truth. All of the propaganda of 40 years is not going to change the fact that human beings in their heart have the law of God written there, and we know right from wrong.
Boy, that's beautifully said. Do you think that the constitutional right of freedom of religion and freedom of speech got hurt as a result of this case with Phil Robertson?
Well, I would say that the constitutional rights, the constitutionally protected right to freedom of religion and the free expression of religion has been eroded for years. The rights of Christians have been up for grabs for years. And, you know, we've got to remind people, and I think we're a couple of generations into folks who need to know this. Listen, friends, America is a pluralistic country in the sense of you're free to believe what you want to believe. You don't want to believe in God? Fine, don't believe in God. You want to engage in aberrant sexual behavior behind closed doors? Okay. But here's the thing. Our nation, 238 years ago now, our nation was founded from a biblical worldview. And when our elected officials defend the Judeo-Christian worldview that birthed America, they are not violating the First Amendment. Let me say this. Now, follow me, folks. Fisher Ames, that wrote the First Amendment, said also that the Bible should be taught in all public schools because that is the best vehicle for teaching young people morality. Now, those that would cry, well, if you defend heterosexual monogamy as the norm, if you defend traditional Judeo-Christian morality, the Ten Commandments, then you're somehow violating the First Amendment. Here's my point. How is it that 21st century secularists know more about the application of the First Amendment than the man who wrote the First Amendment? If you want America, you've got to have morality. If you want morality, you've got to have religion. And if you want to preserve what we've had for nearly 2.5 centuries, we have to understand that it was the biblical worldview that gave us America. Now, to those listening that might be atheist or agnostic or transgender or pro-homosexual, let me say, you want to be an atheist? Go for it. You want to be a homosexual? Go for it. But do not tear down the very context that gives you the freedom not to be a Christian. And it was Christianity that gave us America. And as we tear down the foundation that this nation has rested on for 2 centuries plus, and in fact the Western world, the home the family, traditional marriage, as the gay lobby has demanded not only that they have the freedom to be gay, but that the rest of the culture must endorse and embrace and affirm. And indeed, if you don't celebrate homosexuality the way they do, you're homophobic, you're a hater, you're somehow denying them their constitutional rights. Listen, there's no right in the Constitution to redefine marriage. There's no right, there's no constitutionally protected right to tear down the moral structure that gave us this nation. And again, we're free in the sense you believe what you want to believe, but don't tear down the very worldview that gave you the freedom not to believe in God or not to be moral. If you want to be immoral, but don't tear down the milieu that gave you that freedom,
wow,
which has been America.
Alex, that is spectacular. That's inspiring. Let me take a break. We'll be right back. Dr. Alex McFarland's with us today, and I want to get into his new book, 10 Issues That Divide Christians. We'll talk a little bit about that as well when we return. Okay, we're back, and our special guest today, Dr. Alex McFarland, and he's a professor of Christian Worldview and Apologetics there at the North Greenville University, and radio talk show host, author, speaker. I think he's all over the place, and I like to call him friend because I just love his spirit and what he does. And today we're talking about a variety of things. And I want to get into your new book, Alex, but before I do, I want to finish up with this Duck Dynasty Phil Robertson / Bill O'Reilly. I find it interesting that Bill O'Reilly didn't get the pushback that A&E did because he got it so wrong. He was so wrong with it and so arrogant about being wrong with it. And he has the audacity to go on and then push his book of killing Jesus. I mean, the combination of that it was more than I could handle.
Well, there's a lot on the Bill O'Reilly show that I do like, and I would really love to be on his program sometime and debate with him about some of these issues.
Yeah, I wish you could.
Oh, well, maybe God will open that door at some point. But we've gotten. Let me say it this way, friends. To say that there is morality and it's tied to the nature of God. And since God doesn't change, what's right and wrong doesn't change. That's a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow. But I would say to draw a line in the sand and say, as we've been saying, look, there is an objective, universal right and wrong. And if you don't want to acknowledge it, fair enough. You'll answer to God for that one day. But don't abolish morality in your quest, and let me just say this, I've been in the people business a long time.
Go ahead, man.
The homosexual lobby to legitimize and mainstream homosexual behavior, to mainstream gay marriage, and to redefine the family, all this is about is helping people assuage a guilty conscience and helping millions of people feel good about something deep in their heart they know is wrong. Now, if you want to be immoral, go for it. That's between you and God. But as I said, don't tear down morality that gives you the freedom not to be moral. Now, here's what I would say to the O'Reillys of the world. To say that there is morality and there is God, that's a bitter pill to swallow for some people. But I would submit to you that that is a less bitter pill than the pill we're about to swallow, which is societal chaos, which is the loss of our Constitution, which is the loss of our freedoms and our liberties. And I've got to say this, my friend. If 2014 had been 1776, we would not have an America. We have in America today because there was some women and men that were willing to say, look, right is right, wrong is wrong, there's a God, and we're going to stand up for what we know is true, and we may be killed, we might be imprisoned by the British. That's why on the Declaration of Independence they wrote, appealing to God for the rectitude of our intentions. Now, friends, everyone listening, you need to tell your pastor to preach righteousness. You need to write to your elected officials and say, hey, senator, congressman, governor, city council member, school board member, we love you. I'm praying for you. But if you go wrong, we will see to it at the next election that someone is installed who will stand for what's right. It's a bitter pill to swallow to stand for truth, but that's a less bitter pill than the one we're about to ingest, which is the loss of our nation, the loss of our freedoms, and absolutely societal chaos and ultimately bondage in the days ahead if we don't again get the courage and the righteous fire to stand up for truth. And that means standing against error, which includes the well-funded, well-organized, 4-decade-plus lobby for homosexuality that has infiltrated now the classroom, the media, the arts, the judiciary, the government, and even in some cases the church.
Wow. I just can't even express it any better than you just did. Over to your book, 10 Issues That Divide Christians. It appears that some of these issues that are not only dividing us as a culture and as a people and as a country, they're now dividing the church. We're seeing even churches now say, I'm rethinking this homosexual thing, maybe it's not so bad. We're seeing the pluralization of the church. How can we turn things around if we ourselves are divided?
That's a great question. And while we're talking about things that have to be said, let me say there is a real devil. Satan is real. And Satan has had some good innings in recent years. I mean, he's gotten the church divided on some key things that the Bible has spoken clearly about. And I wrote this book, The 10 Issues That Divide Christians, and I talk about abortion, homosexuality, gay marriage, the environment, the role of religion in politics. And I talk about American exceptionalism and talk about some things that I think Christians really ought to know where they stand on. And I got to say that I know where I stand because I know where the Bible stands. And again, the Bible is a book shown to be inspired, trustworthy, by compelling lines of evidence. By the way, the 10 Issues That Divide Christians, that's my 15th book. And in a number of my other books, The 10 Most Common Objections to Christianity and How to Answer Them, and my Stand series that I wrote with Tyndale and a number of others. I wrote a book for parents on answering the toughest questions your children have about God. But I've in depth unpacked a lot of the evidence, history, archaeology, the manuscripts, so many reasons that we can trust the Bible. And I would be happy to come to anyone listening. I'll come to your church and speak. I'll debate your local atheist. Call me. My website is at alexmcfarland.com. But the reason we, the church, are divided on these fundamental issues is because we live in a culture of biblical illiteracy. And even those within Christendom, think about this, there are supposedly 173 million Christians in America. And if we were biblically informed, if we were disciples of Jesus and committed to obey the Lord, period, it would look like a really different America, wouldn't it?
It sure would, and you would change any election.
Oh, hey, folks, we've got the numbers. I mean, the Phil Robertson outcry, and suddenly A&E backpedaled, and Cracker Barrel and Barnes & Noble that was going to blow out all the Duck Dynasty merchandise, and everybody changed their tune right quick. Listen, for the issues that matter, support of our Constitution, limited government, repeal of this communist medicine called Obamacare, this communist health plan, repeal of the Sharia encroachment that's happening in many communities, defense of traditional marriage, support for the state of Israel, any of the things that matter to conservatives and any of the things that our founders would have stood for. Look, we could swing any election we wanted if Christians would register to vote and then vote from a biblically informed perspective.
Yeah, as they say, vote your values and value your vote. How can people get a copy of this book, Alex?
Well, praise God, it's published by Regal Books of Ventura, California, 10 Issues That Divide Christians. It's available, online. My online store is at alexmcfarland.com, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local Christian bookstores, which I encourage you to support. You name it, you can find it.
Okay. All right, so do you think the church now is beginning, you do a lot of speaking in churches, and do you sense a pushback now that maybe we've allowed this to go too far and maybe the Christian community is starting to wake up and we have to get involved to save our country?
The fires are starting. Moments before this interview for which I'm very grateful, I got a call from Mississippi. A group wants me to come. I'll be in California in a few weeks at the California Baptist Convention is having an evangelism conference. I mean, I'm seeing some sparks, but here's the thing we've got to overcome, this, what I call a false dichotomy, that my faith, my religion is in one box, but politics is in a completely separate box. We've got to understand that Christians must be politically informed and politically engaged. And there's a young generation, the millennials, people that are, say, 29 and younger, they, to a large degree, have zero interest in politics. And let me say it's because of a couple of things. It's because of they've grown up in churches that were absolutely silent on the moral issues like abortion and the defense of marriage. And also then they've been, conditioned to believe that a disciple is just to love Jesus and wait till we die and go to heaven one day. No, a disciple is also to fight for righteousness, stand for truth, even when it's not popular or not convenient. And so we've got to, again, understand that our calling is to be salt and light. Now, we've got the light part. Let's be a witness for the gospel. But we've got to be salt. And salt is a preservative. And if we, well, Benjamin Franklin said this. He said, everybody loves the fruits of freedom, but few people are willing to tend the tree that bears the fruits. Wow. And so young people listening, and maybe not so young, it's time to get back in the fray. And our mission is not just to hunker down, wring our hands, and wait for Christ to come back. He is coming back, but until he does, we better hold the line and stand for truth and even defend truth, which is going to mean taking some public stances that may cost us some popularity points. We got to be more interested in following Jesus, saving souls, and saving a nation rather than our social batting average, and stand for truth, popular or not. And when you get to heaven and God says, well done, you will know it was so worth it.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Alex. I value greatly your time and look forward to having you back often. Keep up the good work, and you can go to alexmcfarland.com and check out his material and look for his new book in the Christian bookstores at Evangel and elsewhere, 10 Issues That Divide Christians. Thank you, my friend. God bless. Keep up the good work, will you?
Bless you. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, talk to you soon. We'll be right back.